wow, all it takes is really believing that there is a better way and waking up every day and spending the next 8 to 10 hours that day, or sometimes more, putting energy towards solving the problem that you're passionate about. And that's carried me for a really long time.
Hi, welcome back to the Restive Perspective. This is a show where we interview female CEOs and the stories and journeys it took to get to them where they are. So I'm incredibly excited to have Stephany from Orum today. Welcome, Stephany.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
To kick us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about Orum?
Orum is the simplest API for fast, reliable payments. A single solution offers access to RTP, FedNow, so our two new instant payment protocols in the US, coupled with ACH, same-day ACH wires, and more. There's a whole bunch of things we're excited about in the wallet space in particular, with the design that we should really be solving time to money, right? I think you'll see in my background that I spent most of my career trying to figure out how to help people who have less have more by building financial planning software and other things in market. And it's just been a really curious question, which is, why isn't money instant? Why isn't it streaming, so to speak? Why is the most recent innovation to access my own dollars from savings accounts on the weekends an ATM withdrawal? What about all these other real-time products that we hear about in other countries? Why doesn't that exist here? And as it's starting to exist, how can we optimize use and access? So when I rewind, so much of this story starts back in my childhood. So as we were just chatting about, I grew up in Portland, Oregon. And, as a kid growing up, I saw the problem firsthand of what it's like for an immigrant, my dad, who was born in the former Yugoslavia, to grow up without, one, a college degree and get into the business universe on his own, and two, how to figure out how to do things without credit, without a credit score, without sort of the history that, financially most of us rely on. And then in our family, I saw this problem of time to money really show up for me. And then as I started to develop a perspective on where I was going to spend my career, I became a certified financial planner, which led me to spending time with a lot more people, ultimately hundreds of thousands and then millions of Americans, through both LearnVest and our acquisition to Northwestern Mutual, where the software was able to tell you what's the best use of the dollar. And the answer that we would get back from people is like, well, I'd love to save more, invest more, et cetera, but if I can't get my money out of my Fidelity account on Saturday, if I have an emergency, that would be too difficult financially. So I'm just not going to put it in a higher yield spot. And I thought, what a problem, right? That we've been able to democratize access to the answer, what should I do with my dollars? And the advice is good and it's sound and it's workable. And the reason people lean out from taking it is because the infrastructure that powers all of the financial services is 50 years old. I really wanted to solve that problem and spent a lot of time thinking about how we would ultimately do it, initially with some ideas that weren't infrastructure. And I realized that until we rebuild the way that financial services gets built and the way money movement gets optimized, we're not touching deep enough to the problem. And I want this to change hundreds of millions of American households. I want this to change small business owners and big enterprise and really have impact.
And so it sounds like you had some great inspiration growing up to become an entrepreneur yourself. How much of an impact did that have on you?
Well, back in the day, my dad did what I think the world would call odd jobs. Today, we've made it a little sexier and maybe it's gig economy. But my dad was the ultimate entrepreneur and my mom supported him thoroughly in that. She worked for the government. Also not super sexy, but very important to have stability in our family. And I saw my dad come up with a number of things. Ultimately, he built a business around a marina. And I definitely think I got some of that entrepreneurial spirit, but I also got a lot of it from my actual work experience. I seemed to find my way ultimately to be surrounded by big thinkers, believers in the impossible, folks that had taken on probably more than they could chew. And my first job in tech was with Alexa Von Tobel, who was then running LearnVest, now running Inspired Capital. And, I was 3 or maybe even 5 years her senior when I joined the team, and she's running this incredible company. And I remember thinking, wow, all it takes is really believing that there is a better way and waking up every day and spending the next 8 to 10 hours that day, or sometimes more, putting energy towards solving the problem that you're passionate about. And that's carried me for a really long time.
How'd you end up there? I mean, it seems like such a pivotal role that you went into?
It's funny. I was working in financial advice. So as a financial planner, I was working for a company where I was building retirement planning software, which we ultimately sold to a bank. And I reached out. I was like, this LearnVest thing, which I heard about on Daily Candy, don't laugh, was really cool. And like, there's somebody else in the world that thinks financial advice is as cool as I think it is. And so I reached out, like I sent an email to feedback@learnvest.com. I wish the story were sexier, but I don't think that many CFPs were reaching out at the time. And so Alexa and I were paired up, and ultimately I made the commitment to leave something I was doing that I loved, relocate from Southern California to New York, where I now live, and to take on the chance of a lifetime to see how we transformed what at the time was really a DIY kind of girl blog for money into something that had tangible, actionable advice, and that as a business model leaned into SaaS as its underlying revenue and economic model, and something that we could scale and distribute, right?
And I actually love that outreach, because I think so often people that are looking to break into tech or looking to break into fintech or whatever it may be kind of think you need the right connection or the right entry point. But so often when you are a founder at the early stage, you're just kind of hungry for passionate talent, and having that sort of, hand in glove candidate that just comes through cold can be pretty magical. So I love the fact that you started that way. I actually think it's a pretty great example for others that might be looking to break in.
I mean, I wasn't even looking for a job. I was literally like, can we link to something, but it's behind your paywall? And it turned into like, how do we partner? And then how do I consult, which turned into a job. So I don't think it's linear. And I certainly didn't envision going from certified financial planner, building software, to being part of a management team that was growing a fintech that we ultimately sold to Northwestern Mutual. And then I got to experience like, what's it like seeing financial services and the infrastructure in financial services inside of a Fortune 100 company. So I think I lived a lot of lives, and I always say that that was kind of like going to Harvard, but I got paid because the on-the-job experience, I think to your point, is so much richer than the classroom, textbook knowledge of what happens in mergers and acquisitions and successful outcomes of businesses coming together.
So let's fast forward to when you decided to launch Orum. What was that like?
As I started to get more curious about getting into this space, again, background as a CFP means that I felt like I had a lot of domain expertise on advice, on wealth management and brokerage products, right? I probably should have said yes when Goldman Sachs said, come build with us, but I didn't. And instead I said, I'm going to take the harder path, the path I haven't followed, and I'm going to learn something as I go. And as I started to get curious, I started to ask questions, meet with people, dig in. The advice I kept getting is that in order to really become a founder in a technical universe, venture-backed company, build a tech company, I'd need a technical co-founder, because I don't write code, actually. So I have some algorithms that are patented. That's not because I wrote the code. It's because I was part of coming up with the conceptual design. And so as a woman, it's already hard enough, right? We know that less than 2% of all venture capital dollars go to women. And then this advice to say, like, dilute yourself. Because you aren't technical, you won't be believable in market. That was really, really hard advice. And I struggled with it. It probably delayed the journey of really going out and launching something longer as a result of wondering and considering and thinking about whether or not I needed to actually follow through with that. And I decided not to. I stayed the course as a solo founder. That said, COVID came along, so I'm raising capital barefoot in my home office on Zoom, which had never been done by me or by the investors. In the spring of 2020. And I'm delighted to say that Alexa, who I worked with at LearnVest, who now runs Inspired Capital, was part of the push. And she said, this is a fundable project. Like, this is a big opportunity. You should be working on this full time. And I was like, no, I'm a great number two, right? And again, I'd heard a lot of this feedback. Great number two. And she wrote an inspiration check, instrumental in feeling ready to take the leap of faith into doing a venture-backed business without a technical bone in my body, and believing that just like the technical people who can build awesome stuff eventually figure out how to sell and commercialize it, that I'd be able to build and rally an incredible team. And so far that's been true.
So love that. And I think there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, a big part of why I started this was I saw so many women saying, I'm a great number two or number three. I don't necessarily have what it takes to be the CEO. And I love that you had the right sort of people around you to really encourage you to move into that position. Just the first question is, if you were an advocate for you at that point in time, like, what would you be saying to encourage you into that spot?
There is a path for somebody who ultimately feels imposter syndrome. I have to believe that half the women who are in Congress, all of the newscasters, every CEO that's female or underrepresented, some point in their life, even currently, probably feels like, oh my God, they're looking at me and I'm not sure I know the answer. And there's a point at which like confidence only gets you so far, and the rest is like, you have to ask for help. And so now that I am where I'm at, I have something that I call the 911 list, which is when I don't know something, either it's further out in the journey of building than I've ever seen, or it's topical, domain specific, or it's timely, something's changing in the regulatory environment, for example, right now is changing rapidly. I phone a friend. And there's so many people that will pick up the phone, especially because I'm older. I feel like my network, got to grow. I didn't found Orum until I was almost 40. So you don't have to be 26 to be fearless. Although I bet it's easier when you're younger in some ways to be fearless. But I think giving the advice to anybody listening and to me back then, which is to say, whatever you don't know is findable. And I wouldn't be able to write code anyways, multiple years into building Orum as a CEO. That just wouldn't be possible. And I think for folks listening, I mean, gosh, I've scraped elbows over so many things. But it wasn't because I didn't know how to write code. It's just because the founder journey is filled with things you've never done in your career before. And if you're doing your job right and you're growing your business and you're growing your company, of course you're going to run into things you've never done. Pick up the phone, call your board, call your investors. Obviously choose those people wisely, because once they're on your board, you don't want somebody that you can't call. Find your advocates, just like you would in the workforce, just like you would in the most senior job you've ever had. Reach across the company or across your network. Do that same thing when you're founding a company, and you'll be just fine.
I think every single founder I've talked to has had imposter syndrome, because you're not good at the whole gamut of things. Like, there's always something new for you. And so making sure that you have that support network and that constant drive to learn and kind of be humble, I see that as one of the really important characteristics for pushing through in those early periods. So it sounds like that first check was really pivotal. Was that what kind of got you comfortable kind of going all in, or were there other things that got you in the right mindset to just say, hey, I'm going to go all in and launch the company?
Well, I'd definitely be remiss in not mentioning that, as a parent, it's not easy to do this if your partner, in this case, my husband, isn't like, wow, that's really awesome. You should do that. But in the beginning, he was just like all in on trying to figure out not only the structure that was going to make this work, but just saying like, I believe in you. And if you want to go do this, like, go do it. So one, I think a ton of support from my family, my friends who were like cheering me on. Cameron, it was curiosity. At Orum, we have, a handful of values that we've had from the very beginning, and show up with curiosity is the number one, not necessarily in order of importance, but like, why would a certified financial planner ever be building payments infrastructure and trying to figure out how the hell B2B sales work, which by the way is not easy. It's because of curiosity. And like every day I wake up and I'm like, well, that's interesting. Oh, I've learned something. And so being curious at every turn in the road really motivated me through that kind of beginning process, and taking time to become an expert in that topic. Payments is knowable. You can read some books, you can talk to some people, and you can get pretty good at how it works today. I think where the challenge always lies is, and this is the curiosity for me, is how do we make it better? When we fast forward 10 years, Orum won't be done, but what will be different about the world when payments is optimized, orchestrated, speed is always managed, and you never have to think about how will it get there. You just think about how fast. Imagine what we would build in financial services. So those are the kinds of things that like pushed me over the edge, which is to say, tomorrow the world's going to feel exactly the same. But years from now, after continuing to work on the problem and being curious about how to make innovation happen in a place that is not innovative, hasn't changed in 50 years, that's going to be worth doing. And it's still worth it multiple years in.
So aside from the network of advisors or talking to a number of people, any other tactical things that you feel like you did well to make that jump into starting the company?
One other thing that I really think is under talked about is having a coach. You can also have a therapist, perhaps, but that's different. I have a coach, and this isn't the same as the kind of coach I might have had in a senior operating role. This is a management coach who's really very, very intimately focused on the founder journey. And I think coaching is super personal. So like the kind of coach you might pick would be different. But as a founder, particularly without a co-founder, I could call my mom, I suppose, with like the what am I struggling with, and she'll listen. I can complain to my husband, who happens to be a lawyer and sometimes has good insights about the thing I'm worried about. But growing as a person, developing new capabilities, right? Somebody said once, and I think it's very true, what got you here and what made you successful in prior roles is not what makes you successful in the founder and CEO seat. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. What got me here, it was like I always had the answer. I was willing to do the work, and I was willing to be bold enough to say, I have the answer to that, right? Well, when you're the founder and you always have the answer, what are you building? Something not that interesting, right? So you need to be in a position to change. And I think finding someone that can work with you as you develop and you see things that you've never seen before. And coming back to my coach as, I think, a very, very, very critical input to being able to become a better and better leader, as not only I'm changing, but what we're building and the stage we're at and the cycle we're in is changing and continuously adapting. I wish more people knew that, like, that's the starting point. Make that investment, spend those dollars, and prioritize the time of all the other things that you can move around on the calendar. But even if we kind of have nothing to talk about, so to speak, no agenda, there's always something to talk about. And it's been transformational.
When did you get your coach on that journey?
Not early enough. I wish I had known to seek someone out like right in the first year. I met him in the second year. So early, but not early enough. The first year, I would have made better choices, right? I would have hired differently, like so many things different.
So I'd love to focus on fundraising. And you obviously have had a successful journey. Can you, just outline what that's looked like so far? And then would love to kind of click up and see what you would give in terms of advice to other women going through that process.
The reason I love fundraising is because I think it's a chance to connect with people who understand or can understand what you're doing, and to selectively and carefully think about right fit profile. So I have 3 things I look for, and I haven't raised post Series B money, so I'll let you know as I get further out how the formula looks. But from seed to A to B, the formula for me has been the same. And this is really what I saw modeled in raising capital in various other stages of my career previously, including with LearnVest. Number 1, and I think really critically, stage matters. There are stage specific investors for a reason. Seed stage is nothing like growth stage, right? It's just fundamentally different. And there's a difference between like a big fund like Sequoia creating a seed stage, early stage fund versus funds who only do seed stage. And I found myself gravitating to stage because you understand what I'm going through as a founder and what our business is going to look like. If you're asking me for a 5-year forecast in my seed stage fundraising, we're misaligned. We don't have ACE, right? We don't have alignment. So number 1, stage. Number 2, this has been true for me over each of the raises I've done, and I think remains true as I look to raise money sometime in the future, which is sector matters. And fintech is a pretty big area. Payments makes it more narrow, and infrastructure makes it even more narrow. This isn't SaaS. If you want to look at SaaS metrics, call somebody who's building something in SaaS. My numbers look a lot more like early days PayPal than they do, fast-moving XYZ software company. Payments is very slow. It's a very different kind of business model. And so it's not just fintech, but it's really, can you understand the domain that I'm going to be spending time in? Because I'm going to need your help, particularly in the earlier stages with product feedback and questions about why something is or isn't working. Finding product market fit is, after all the money gets handed out, the next hardest thing, right? And not every company gets there. And so if you have investors who don't understand what you're building and don't understand the domain, it's harder, not impossible, but it's harder to cycle through the learnings that are going to get you to product market fit. And then the third thing I always look for, and I think this will never change, is just good people. You know what? Company building in its heyday, sure, it feels great. Everybody's, rising tide lifts all boats. Great. And then it's not. And what do you do when it's a hard day? When your biggest customer cancels a contract early, when you have a system outage, when you have a security breach, all of those things are going to happen to you 100% and more. Bad things are going to happen as you build a company. And you want to be able to pick up the phone and say, I'm not sure, but I have a problem and I need some help. Can you talk me through it? And we've had times like that at Orum where we've seen our customers go through something that was unexpected or unplanned. We've luckily, I'm going to knock on real wood here, not had a, outage of any kind that was detrimental, but those things are coming. We will absolutely someday have something go wrong that we didn't know. And the best we could do is try to pre-plan and then call on people that are great. Those people are great in hard times, but they're also great in good times. They talk you up. They promote you to other companies that might want to buy your products. They help you get in the door with more senior folks as you go up market in your sales. So just good people. There's just not enough said about like really quality humans who care about you. One of my investors, Matt Harris, he's at Bain Capital Ventures. Sometimes he'll call me and like the phone rings and I'm like, I should answer that. It's Matt Harris. And a couple of my investors do this actually really well. Satya Patel from Homebrew in particular, also amazing at this. She's just like, I just had 5 minutes. I wanted to do like a quick health check. How's your mental health? How are you feeling? Checking in on XYZ thing we just talked about. And like, how nice that somebody else is thinking about me. Because as a founder, you're thinking about all the other people that work for you. You're thinking about all your customers. Back to my point of like having a coach, you don't have very many people where you can just be like, I'm going to pour my heart out because I'm not sure what I'm doing. And I need to talk to somebody. So to know that other people are looking out for you through good times and bad, I think to me, that's just been, it's been really encouraging and inspiring to have folks that are like that. So.
Yeah. And you're definitely entering into a marriage here. I mean, as you mentioned, this is often a 10-year plus journey. So you want to have the right people along for that ride because it's hard to get rid of them.
Yes, exactly.
And what do you feel like you did tactically really well as your fundraising process? And I think just for listeners, it'd be helpful to outline, some of the core investors that you have brought on. You mentioned you're at your B, but what that actual journey looked like for you.
Yeah, so we have some incredible investors from everything we started in the beginning, which is Inspired Capital, our inspiration check. Satya Patel at Homebrew led our seed. Matt Harris at Bain Capital Ventures led our Series A. And then Samir Gandhi at Accel and Jeff Reitman at Canopy co-led our Series B. And then we've got an incredible syndicate, Clock Tower Ventures, Box Group, American Express Ventures, Acrew Capital. It's just a really rich portfolio of people. And one of the things I tried to do is, one, build a board that reflects what I believe is sort of the right configuration. So 50% of the board today is female. I try to reserve money in every round, at least 10%, to go to female or underrepresented investors. And I hope to be able to do more next time because we'll be raising bigger round in the future. And I think very tactically speaking, fundraising, again, I come back to like, it's about storytelling, not like make up a story. Storytelling as in help somebody understand the conviction that you have for this problem space in a very short period of time, whether they are or are not already an expert in the thing you're going to talk to them about. Help them walk away feeling like, if I don't back Stephany to work on that, we're going to be missing out on something in the world. That's what I mean when I say storytelling. Help them connect with what you're doing. The other thing I'd say tactically is like, do your homework. I know it sounds crazy, but like the internet exists for a reason. Don't take a meeting with someone that you didn't research thoroughly, because the intersection of your backgrounds, your college experience, your network, that will help you know, where are they coming from? What are their lived experiences? Do they know anything about the product? Have they already invested in something competitive? That's a big gotcha. I also think very tactically, like be organized. Fundraising is a series of organized steps. Step one is a meeting. After that, there's going to be a bunch of other things. Be ready. Have your data room ready to go, organized, titled properly, downloadable, accessible. Follow up, build in 5 minutes or 15 minutes of buffer, whatever you need. Depends on if you're in Zoom or in person, I suppose, these days. And send the follow-ups. Thank people. Link them to things you promised you'd send them. And before you go out the door, before any conversations of meaningful fundraising, think about all the questions that anybody that you've ever talked to has had about your business. Because investors are going to look for reasons to not invest. It's like part of the DNA. And then I think like stay positive and try to stay as healthy as you can. There's no easy answers, but a glass of wine when you're stressed out is probably a less good decision than like a green juice and an early night's sleep if possible. And taking time to care for yourself and manage the mental health aspects of being told no, because you will be told no. Zero fundraising is like yes, yes, and yes. And understanding that being told no doesn't mean you're not great. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't mean it won't work. Try to find understanding in the no's when you get them. Dig, ask people, press them for more information. Find out if there's a fundamental problem that you're not addressing so that you can fix that before you have more conversations. But also just really take care of yourself. I know it's so hard and it's so compressed, and fundraising is stressful and can be anxiety inducing, can also be really fun. But that mental health aspect is, I think, incredibly important and worth talking about.
And then last question, what advice do you have for women that may be contemplating going into the CEO seat?
I love women who are thinking about breaking into the CEO seat because I think there should be more of us doing it. And so my best advice is start to look at what industries you're interested in. Think about where you stand today and what information you want to learn about what would it take to be in a role, whether it's founder-led CEO or whether it's journeying from VP to SVP to C-suite and higher up, right? I think there are different paths to taking an approach to getting into a CEO or founder position. And a lot of that is just starting to look at what skills do you have that you think are applicable and what skills do you think you want to work on? I spent a number of years actually working on stuff in retail and supply chain because all I had done was digital. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I someday want to be a CEO, at the time I wasn't even thinking founder, I should probably know how the supply chain works, right? I don't have any experience in that. So sometimes I think it's about taking roles that also expose you, build your network. And then I think, the last really tactical thing I would say is believe in yourself, write a business plan. Every big thing starts somewhere, often in the darkness of a bedroom. I mean, look at Sarah Blakely's story. You've heard so many great women tell you I sold this out of the trunk of my car until one day it worked. Believe in yourself, write the business plan, start to surround yourself with other ambitious people, find ways to spend time, whether you're working full-time or not, engaging in the passion area and building out a network that you can then use as your 911 list, because you're absolutely going to find yourself calling those people, whether it's now in the role you're in or whether it's as a founder or CEO in the future. I think practicing the idea that you want to learn something and get better at, or really take a risk and say, I'd love to be nominated for something. Could you submit me? I'm doing a LinkedIn post. Will you promote it? Small things like that give you some courage to start putting yourself further and further out there into the universe. But I think the biggest part is work on the imposter syndrome, work with a coach if you possibly can. And remember that everybody who stands in a big role on a big stage, who writes a book, whose company gets acquired, who IPOs, every single one of those people has felt imposter syndrome and believed at some point in the journey that they couldn't figure it out, and they absolutely did. And you can too. And I think that's part of the magic of all of us reaching out to support each other.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great to have you.
Cameron, it was such a pleasure. I'm excited to do this with you. And thank you so much for having me. I really had such a blast having this conversation.